Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, heated reactions to a vote by the County Board of Supervisors.
-16. Following are the procedures.
How supervisors are divided in their support and opposition to a police use of force bill authored by a San Diego lawmaker. And as border crossings surge, the Trump administration says more money is needed to care for migrants and asylum seekers.
I don't want anybody to be victim of a crime out there or be injured because they were unable to get a concealed weapon permit.
Sheriff Bill Gore talks to KPBS about the rise in concealed carry gun permits being issued in San Diego County. And how Feeding San Diego is trying to expand as more local kids deal with food insecurity. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Wednesday, May 1st. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. San Diego County leaders oppose a bill authored by a San Diego Assemblywoman. In a 3-2 vote, county supervisors voted to formally oppose Shirley Weber's bill to change when police can use deadly force and how they're held accountable. It calls for the state to change the language in the use of force laws from reasonable to necessary. It also makes it easier to file criminal charges against law enforcement. After the vote, supporters of the bill shouted at supervisors who voted in favor of the resolution.
Please proceed. Please proceed.
APN 399-170-16. Following are the procedures.
Supervisors also voted to support a bill in the state Senate that would reform deadly force laws. Supervisor Greg Cox says there are discussions to combine the two bills and that it's premature to take a position on Weber's bill. Locally, more people are carrying concealed weapons. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman spoke to Sheriff Bill Gore about the increase in permits.
In February of last year, there were around 1,300 concealed weapons permits. Through this April, that number has risen to more than 2,400 permits.
So we're evaluating the good cause. We've expanded some of the categories, and that's why you see the increase.
Sheriff Bill Gore says to get a concealed weapons permit, people need to show good cause, meaning they are in harm's way. And simply wanting a permit for self-defense doesn't do that. But Gore says the Sheriff's Department has been working to more broadly define what good cause means.
To get a concealed weapon, concealed carry permit, you have to have good cause. And what we have done is looked at what that good cause requirement is and try to broadly define it as we can, because I don't want anybody to be victim of a crime out there or be injured because they were unable to get a concealed weapon permit.
Gore says in the past there was a misconception that the sheriff didn't give out many permits.
A lot of it's educating people that we do give them out. They can apply, which in the past they don't even apply because the sheriff doesn't give them out. It's never been, couldn't be further from the truth.
Gore says he's been working with the Political Action Committee San Diego County gun owners on the issue of expanding concealed carry permits. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
SDSU students held a vigil today for the woman killed in the Poway synagogue shooting. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar has the story.
Students, faculty, and staff from San Diego State University came together Wednesday and read a Jewish prayer for healing.
I decided to come out here because I wanted to support the Jewish community on campus. I am not Jewish myself, but I have some very dear friends that are.
Saturday, a 19-year-old gunman allegedly opened fire at the Chabad of Poway synagogue, killing a 60-year-old woman and injuring 3 others. Marshall Kata is a Jewish student at the university. He, along with several other students, wrote postcards to the congregation of the synagogue to show them their support.
I came to write a card because I feel that there is strength in knowing that even, so however far away, that there are people behind you. Hope is a strong thing, it's a good message to send.
Authorities are investigating Saturday's shooting as a hate crime. Just a few weeks ago, the Black Resource Center at San Diego State was vandalized. Students say it's difficult to process these acts of hate, especially when they hit so close to home.
I know for the Black community, there were many emails sent out to all students addressing it and many meetups for students to come together and show support, and just the welcoming environment and the positive on top of such a negative that the school creates is really great.
Faculty at the university say it's especially important to start a dialogue about these difficult situations at a young age.
The students on our campus are the same age as the alleged perpetrator of this hate crime. I think it's very important. I think they need avenues to unpack their confusion, their grief, their anger, and that's part of what we do in the classroom, but we also need to come together outside of the classroom to do that as well.
Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
President Trump is making an emergency request to cover costs at the border. The money would go toward shelter and care for migrants, many of the families seeking asylum. Customs and Border Protection says the U.S. is on track for 1 million such crossings in 2019. The Trump administration says it needs $4.5 billion to cover the additional cost. The money would not be used to fund a new border wall. President Trump is trying to use military money for that project. From drugs to violent crimes to charges of war crimes, some of the military's elite fighters are involved in a string of bad headlines. Earlier, I talked with KPBS reporter Steve Walsh about a case playing out in San Diego, the growing demand for special forces, and the military's challenge to keep pace. Steve, there's been a lot of publicity surrounding the case of SEAL Chief Eddie Gallagher, who was set to stand trial for war crimes. But you report that this is not the only issue with the Special Forces.
No, it's not. Actually, there are a total of 6 SEALs scheduled to go on trial for war crimes in San Diego this year. It's also in a separate case with East Coast SEALs. They're charged with murdering a U.S. Marine in Mali.
So what's going on? What's happening?
The main problem seems to be stress. They're at a very high operations tempo, and they have been for the last 17 years, since right after 9/11/2001. Also, they have a very high suicide rate now. There were 22 suicides in 2018. That's triple the year before.
It takes special characteristics to be part of the Special Forces, I would imagine.
And that's part of the issue here. It takes a very long time to create a Special Forces operator. And if you're trying to get a number of people into the force, there's always that chance that the wrong people might get in. So we went through some of the testimony. We've looked at some of the congressional reports on this. But I wanted to really kind of drill down and talk to some of the SEALs themselves. So we talked to a number of them, including we sat down with a supporter of Eddie Gallagher, who is the Navy SEAL chief who is going to be going on trial for war crimes at the end of May.
Ed Heiner retired from the SEALs in 2010 after 9 deployments. Sitting on a couch at his home in San Diego, Heiner rattled off a list of combat tours.
I was fortunate enough to be able to serve in Iraq, Afghanistan, and even in the Philippines.
His experience is not uncommon. The operations tempo for Special Forces skyrocketed after 9/11/2001, and it remains high.
In the op tempo, we're going to have to figure that out. We're going to have to mandatory put people away for a couple of years, let them take a breather from it. You can't keep letting them do this.
Heiner is convinced most Americans don't really understand the crushing demands of their job.
You have to look at the context. They're in combat to kill people. Their mission were to kill ISIS people. And they were fighting, street to street, house to house.
Heiner has grappled with issues from his career in the past, but he's never sought counseling.
Most of us, we get together, friends get together, and we kind of talk it through. And if you have an issue, we all kind of stay connected. And, because we can talk to each other with no shame, just no guilt, anything. So if we have issues, we say what it is and say what we did and why we feel that way.
The line between training and deployment can be incredibly thin. I wanted to get a feel for that SEAL mindset, so I talked to a couple of disabled SEALs. David Charbonnet was seriously injured after graduating in 2008 from the famously grueling SEAL basic training outside San Diego. Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL, or BUDS, is designed to weed out people with tests of physical endurance and teamwork.
When I graduated, I thought that, it'd feel a huge sense of completion, but the job, it's you're always preparing and always training, so it really felt like less of a milestone than I had expected.
The day before his first deployment, Charbonnet's parachute malfunctioned about 100 feet from the ground.
When I looked at my legs, they were laying different than how I had expected, and I touched my knee, couldn't feel it, and I knew exactly what had happened, and I knew that I wasn't going to be going on deployment, that was for sure.
Charbonnet now lives in a wheelchair. He's president of VIP Neuro Rehabilitation Center. The nonprofit focuses on physical therapy. Among his clients are other medically retired SEALs. He tried to describe the Special Forces mindset.
It's drilled into your head so that when, these impossible situations come up, it doesn't deter you mentally, and you're able to push through. I don't know if I could have been prepared better for, breaking my back.
Working alongside Charbonnet is Brandon Myers. He's a medically retired SEAL lieutenant. He was also paralyzed during a training accident before his first mission.
It's the only thing I've ever wanted. It's still the only thing I ever want.
In Myers' case, the 30-year-old fell from a 40-foot wall during an obstacle course.
Every day that I still fight, I know it's a long shot, but that's what I still have as my ultimate goal. I mean, I don't care if I'm 45, If I can get my legs going again, I'm going immediately back to the teams and doing everything I can to pick up where I left off.
Steve, we've discussed the problem, but what's the solution?
So Congress has seen these issues, and they've actually ordered Special Operations Command to do a review of ethics and leadership. And we've actually obtained a copy of the unreleased report. Now, it's very short on specifics, but they did talk about the impact of traumatic brain injuries on decision-making. And they are going to review things like BUDS and the ethics training there, as well as they're looking at ethics and leadership throughout the force. There was actually a 90-day stand-down that we know happened. So in the report, Special Operations Command says that they are assessing the cumulative effects of over 17 years of continuous combat. So clearly, there's going to be more to come.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, Attorney General Barr faces tough questions from Democratic senators on how he handled the Mueller report. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
The latest annual report by Feeding America shows kids locally are struggling with hunger. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says the nonprofit is trying to reduce that number.
Alexander Hamilton Elementary School hosts this food pantry twice a month.
Gracias.
Stephanie Partita has a first grader here and often comes to pick up food.
I incorporate it in when I make dinner and lunch and breakfast sometimes. Depending on what they give us, it's something different every time we come. Ooh, corn. Yummy. I know what I'm making for dinner.
She says the fresh foods help offset her grocery bills.
It does actually, because a lot of times it's a lot of fruit and canned food too. So it's less fruit that I have to buy, and fruit can get expensive sometimes, especially like apples and oranges.
Partita was able to pick up a number of items Wednesday.
Beans, corn on the cob, the green beans, asparagus, and some spaghetti and apples.
This is what's left of today's food pantry. All the food was given out, and officials who put on this event, Feeding San Diego, they say that they try and target schools that need it the most. Here at Alexander Hamilton Elementary, over 90% of students are eligible for free or reduced lunches.
Children are the most vulnerable members of our society, and hunger impacts them in profound ways. It impacts their learning, it impacts their growth, it impacts their ability to heal from illness or disease.
Feeding San Diego says it operates 40 food pantries at schools across San Diego and is looking to expand.
The availability of donated food is growing faster than the distribution capacity of our network. And so we need more nonprofit agencies at the neighborhood level who are willing to partner with Feeding San Diego to help us to rescue food, to help us to distribute that food to the community.
I was making chicken tostadas today, so I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to add asparagus and corn on the cob with it.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Apartment residents in Linda Vista say they're going on rent strike. People who live there say the property owner is raising rent by as much as $400. They say they refuse to pay the increase. The state legislature is considering a package of bills that would address the housing crisis. KQED's Thuy Vu talked with an assemblyman who is leading that effort.
Here now to talk about housing are State Assembly Member Buffy Wicks of Oakland, and Palo Alto Mayor Eric Filseth. Nice to have you both here.
How are you?
Thank you for having us.
Assemblymember Wicks, you proposed 3 housing bills that would include creating a statewide rental data registry as well as developing more affordable housing. How much of a dent do you think this will make in the state's housing crisis?
Well, I think, honestly, we need an all-of-the-above strategy. You know, I think the public's demanding that. You look at the challenges that our housing crisis has created. We need to build 3.5 million more homes here in California. We're 48th in the country in terms of the highest number of people with the fewest homes. That disparity is big. We've seen a 40% increase in homelessness in the last couple years in my communities. You know, we have a third of people in California that are paying 50% or more of their income into rent, which is significant, right? So we have big issues. I don't think there's going to be one thing that solves this problem, frankly.
There'll be a slew of
I think it's a package of
solutions.
things that involve building more homes, building low-income subsidized housing, building affordable housing, and building housing for what we call missing middle. Those folks that are middle class, they don't qualify for subsidized housing, but they also can't afford the current market rate.
I know you're a co-author of SB 50, the very controversial housing bill. Why do you think that's necessary?
It's necessary because we haven't built enough homes that we need to, you know, and cities have not issued the number of amounts of permits that they need to. If you look at the statewide level, we have something called RENA goals, which is cities should be permitting housing at different levels, very low income, moderate, and above moderate. Most cities have not met those goals.
And Mayor Filseth, I have to ask you about this because it's the more affluent communities primarily that have come out against SB 50, and it does feel a little bit like NIMBYism to some folks, that you want to, not you in particular, but you know that the communities that are opposing this are engaging in sort of a drawbridge mentality to keep out lower income residents.
You know, I think in any community there's going to be some people that are going to say we don't need any more housing, we're full, and others are going to say, you know, we think single family houses are immoral. And I think most people are in between. Nobody, I mean, our town, nobody wants to be a quote-unquote drawbridge town. Everybody understands the problem, okay? Nobody wants to lose socioeconomic diversity they want to have. I mean, the hardest job we have in town to fill right now is cable and line splicer. These are the folks that climb up the utility pole in the middle of the night after the power goes on and solder the wires back together. Well, they can't afford to live here, right? We need those people here.
Buffy, there are dozens of housing bills being considered right now in the state legislature on the issue of housing. Is this a case of overreach by state politicians threatening the ability of cities to decide what is best for their communities?
Well, I can speak to my community. I have Mayor Libby Schaaf supporting all the bills that I'm working on, and she's also a supporter of SB 50, London Breed as well. So I think you have local electeds who are also
But the San Francisco Board of Supervisors is against SB 50, even though Mayor London Breed is okay with it.
Right, you know, but she is the mayor of this town and she's supportive, and I think you see a lot of local electeds, mayors in my district in particular, that are very supportive of SB 50 and a lot of the other housing legislation, because I think, you know, what we're seeing is we're responding to what we're seeing in our communities. We're seeing the gentrification and the displacement happening in a very negative way. You know, we're seeing the homelessness increase, so we have to respond to that. And so I think what you're seeing is action, and I think you also see the governor as well. He was very clear in terms of what he wanted to do as governor, and he was overwhelmingly elected to be governor, and that meant building more homes in our communities. So I think it's an appropriate response.
Is it appropriate, Mayor Filseth, or is it overreach? Do you feel like the state is coming in and telling you in Palo Alto how to address the housing situation in your town?
Yeah, we do think it's overreach. I think, you know, local planning is sort of the foundation of how we do land use, and this gets in the way of that. In order to justify that, you have to go, well, local voters are either irresponsible or immoral or both, and I don't think that's an accurate view. Everybody's trying to solve the problem, and I wish that the state would work with us instead of against us.
All right, Assemblymember Buffy Wicks and also Palo Alto Mayor Eric Filseth, nice to have you both here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That conversation was part of the show KQED Newsroom. You can watch more at kqed.org. An effort to strengthen the plastic bag ban in Imperial Beach will be considered tonight. A new ordinance would ban the sale and use of plastic bags used by stores and restaurants. There would also be tighter restrictions on straws, utensils, and food containers. Mayor Serge Dedina supports the idea. He says current rules, including the state's plastic bag ban, have failed to reduce pollution. California farms are struggling to find enough workers. A survey by the California Farm Bureau shows more than half of the farmers and rangers were unable to hire all the workers they needed at some point in the past 5 years. Farming advocates say more flexible immigration laws would help.
We're seeing increased amount of our fresh fruits and vegetables being grown and imported from outside of California, outside of the United States. So one of the critical issues of solving this labor crisis is that we retain those local jobs. Economic development is so important for rural California, but also to maintain really a diverse local food supply.
Those who responded to the survey say worker shortages have caused them to downsize or delay some crops. California has a strong craft beer industry, but most of the ingredients come from other states. Capital Public Radio's Randall White says UC Davis is trying to change that.
U.S. craft brewers have official guidelines for more than 150 styles of beer, and California brewers have a countless number of interpretations. But at the base of all those is a very limited number of ingredients: water, yeast, hops, and the malted grain, with barley reigning supreme. On a Yolo County farm just north of Woodland is a science experiment aimed at finding the perfect types of barley for California's brewers. Conrad Mathesius with UC Davis walked me through the fields, growing 3 different varieties, all using organic methods.
Barley's a hardy crop, so whether or not it can grow in California is not really a question. It grows everywhere.
Mathesius says it's a drought-tolerant winter crop that could work well for farmers looking for a rotation option between other plantings. Although currently very little is grown in California when you compare it to how much barley we consume.
This is kind of hopefully the beginnings of the farm to pint movement, or the farm to glass movement, whatever you want to call it.
Mathesius says farmers would get a good price, but whether the processors or brewers could afford the locally grown grain remains to be seen. In Sacramento, I'm Randall White.
Will continue to be dry here tonight, but what we will notice are more clouds inching closer. Here's a look at the satellite and radar from several hours ago, and not a lot of precipitation in California as a whole, and that is because we are under the influence of a high pressure. Now, that high pressure will continue to be in place at least through the late weekend, and then we'll begin to see some changes in terms of temperatures and even the chance for some wet weather. Tonight, partly cloudy in San Diego with a low of 58. We move into your regional forecast and looking at a few clouds out to Oceanside with a low of 53, cooling down to 59 in Borrego Springs and a low of 43 in Mount Laguna. And as you head inland, not so much partly cloudy, but looking at a better chance for that moonlight to peek on through. As for tomorrow, seasonable air builds back into the southwest, so a dry, pleasant Thursday as you head to and from work. Once again, morning and late night hours, we will notice those clouds, but throughout the day, getting some sun into Oceanside with a high of 69, also in the upper 60s for San Diego for your Thursday, and topping off in the 90s in Borrego Springs, 63 in Mount Laguna. We'll continue to feel this warm air into the late week forecast, as well as dry and pleasant conditions. Most of that wet weather geared to the eastern half of the U.S. Now, as we talk about the next several days here, Friday, we're topping off at 70 at the coast, looking at partial sunshine, and then we'll be in the upper 60s Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. This is when we watch an upper level trough come on through for your weekend and into early next week, and temperatures begin to fall off. We'll definitely notice it in the deserts. Not going to be a huge temperature change for the inland areas. Our warm day will be Friday, a high of 76, remaining in the mid to upper 70s Saturday, and then we'll be looking at partial sunshine, sitting in the lower 70s in the inland areas Sunday and Monday. Here's a look at the deserts, where the heat is really pumping for the next several days in the lower 90s through Saturday. And then we'll be looking at a cool down Sunday and Monday with a high of 79 on your Monday. Once again, upper level low, upper level trough comes in, drags in that cooler air. Also going to be noticing that cool down into the mountains, coming out of the 60s from your Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Then by the early week, only topping off in the upper 50s. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Dajia Swad. Back to you.
Now here's a recap of tonight's top stories. County supervisors formally oppose a use of force bill authored by a San Diego Assemblywoman. Shirley Weber's bill would change how police can use deadly force and how they're held accountable. Those who voted in favor of the resolution say Weber's bill would be too restrictive. The Trump administration says it needs more money to care for asylum seekers and other migrants. Congress is being asked to provide $4.5 billion in emergency funding. The money would not be used to pay for border wall construction. Apartment residents in Linda Vista say they're going on a rent strike. They demonstrated outside of their homes this afternoon. They say property owners recently increased their rent by as much as $400. Now here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. The economics of dinosaur fossils. Planet Money takes a look at how museums and private buyers are paying 7 figures for T-Rex bones. And on Midday Edition, looking back at a nuclear disaster in the Soviet Union and the modern-day risks of generating nuclear power. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.